Welcome. Welcome, everybody. We're glad to have you. This is our third and final meeting here for Dialogues. We want to welcome everybody. And I just have to say before we start, this has been a fantastic opportunity. We've got another great program today. We've got panel discussions. We've got a couple of speeches, talks that are going to be given. And so we're certainly excited for everybody to be here. And we hope that this will continue to stimulate conversation going forward. Before we move any further, I want to reintroduce Jacob Bell. This is Jacob Bell. He's an art student graduating here soon, a senior. Jacob has been capturing a lot of what we've been doing in the dialogues here in art. And so I wanted to give Jacob an opportunity. This, of course, was the first painting. Patrick, do you want to go to the second one? And we'll have maybe Jacob discuss some of the things that he had tried to capture here in the second painting. Jacob?
Yeah, thank you. In this piece, I was thinking a lot about the aspect of a panel discussion. So I wanted to include a few of the chairs that I have a great view of in this piece. I also included a couple of specifically items or objects or ideas that the panelists and speakers discussed. I really appreciated the comment about secondhand boots, which is what's depicted there at the top, as well as the electric toothbrush comment. Yeah, and then I included up there in the top left corner a drawing of the copper mine that from Chile that we discussed. Basically, because it was like a panel discussion, I really wanted to have the things that were explicitly said and yeah, just to get that idea of having a conversation. So yeah, that's what this piece was all about.
Thanks so much, Jacob. I don't know if Roz knew that her boots were going to make the painting. Did you? Good. I worry that I don't think she's here today, but she'll be pleased to know. Anyway, I want to turn some time over to Patrick. He's going to go through the agenda for today's meeting. And so, Patrick.
Thanks so much. This has been a great trip so far. There's been a tremendous amount of conversation that's been happening off stage as well. I think we're making some really good headway here. So I wanted to start off by just bringing us back together on some points of agreement and some things that we need to still be thinking about. I think one of the things that we have been agreeing on is the overall goal that we're shooting for as a society, and that's well-being for humans and the planet. And by planet, I mean all these ecosystems that our economy depends on, our health depends on. I think that's a common goal that brings us together. I think there's been good agreement that historically economic growth has brought a tremendous amount of well-being for humans. Craig made a great case that infant mortality has plummeted, lifespans have gone up, the number of hours that people have to work has been greatly reduced. And education has been greatly enhanced. There's been a lot of good things that have come out of this. And because of all that good, we have predicated much of our economy on the notion of growth. Our retirement systems, our infrastructure systems, our social safety nets, our public services. We've set the system up to plan on growth, to fund the creation of businesses, to build and expand schools, to buy houses. We rely on growth to keep the food system going, the energy system, the healthcare system, defense systems. It is all predicated on a foundational assumption of growth. And that's what we're here to continue to discuss. Because another problem that I think we have all come to a general agreement on is that we are currently in a very unsustainable state, a state that Rob referred to as ecological overshoot. And there's lots of evidence for that in terms of biodiversity and habitat loss, in terms of pervasive chemical pollution. We've got all these forever chemicals that we've now littered the planet with, PFAS and PCBs and things like that. We've got a tremendous amount of excessive nutrient contamination, these things that turn Utah Lake into pea soup every year and open up a huge dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. We've got continued use of fossil fuel pollution that drives global warming and is causing a lot of other risks related to heat stress, related to extreme weather, related to sea level rise, lots of other problems. And some of those changes that are being driven by climate change are irreversible. A fourth point that I think we have all agreed on is that Earth's ecosystems will return to a sustainable state. The definition of unsustainable means it can't continue in perpetuity. And so the question becomes, how do Earth's ecosystems get back to that sustainable state? We've got an opportunity to plan it, or we can let the Earth take care of it for us, which it may not care much about our economy, our society, our hopes and dreams, our kids. So that's a decision that we have to make. A fifth point that Rob made is that physics tells us unequivocally that growth will end, but there's a bit of debate to be had about at what point. Are we looking at just a couple more decades or further out into the future? And sixth point of agreement, I think among all of the panelists and other participants I've heard from, is that there are roles for both efficient market mechanisms as well as good policy. And Craig made a great point that there's lots of policy. Some of it moves us in the right direction. Some of it gets in our way. And so we have to be very deliberate about the policy that we're developing. A couple points that require some more discussion. We're going to get to this a lot today. What do we mean by well-being, and for whom? How do we define that? How do we measure it? And is it for every human on the planet? Is it for a few? Is it possible to decouple economic growth from energy and resource use and waste production? There's been a little bit of data showing both sides of that. I'd like to get a little bit deeper into that today, this decoupling issue. Third is, what is the current state of our unsustainability or overshoot? And over what time frame can we correct our course and get ourselves back to a sustainable state? And lastly, and we've heard this in lots of the questions that you guys have submitted, what can we all be doing to move us in a better direction? I've really appreciated all of the questions people have submitted. There are cards that are distributed throughout the auditorium here. Please keep writing these questions on the cards. There's also a QR code on the back that you can submit questions through Poll Everywhere. We've used those to, again, inform our panel discussion today, and we're going to use those to see what comes beyond this. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jeannie Johnson. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, everyone. As you know, my role in our conference together is to talk a little bit about the mindsets that we bring to the solution space. So the one that we're going to talk about today is one that I call the Nineveh syndrome. So I'll let all of you go look that up on your own. I made it up, so you won't find it on Google, right? It's Nineveh syndrome. And yep, I'm talking about Jonah and Nineveh. So you can unpack that later. But I want to give you an example of what it looks like in action. So how many of you remember Y2K? Yep, the disaster that didn't happen, right? So I was on the Y2K committee for the Central Intelligence Agency. And this was the hot disaster of the day. So we are calling electricity companies. We're trying to figure out just how seismic is the disaster going to be. Are we going to have nuclear meltdown in Russia? Are we going to have land grabs in the Middle East? What's going to happen when those digits roll over and it's the year 2000 and all kinds of electrical malfunctions across the globe start to occur? Now, there were a whole lot of bright folks invested in this. I was doing my own interviewing. I was in charge of helping employees at CIA be prepared for the big Y2K that's coming. Now, I see what's happening on your faces. You're like, oh no, now you're going to deny climate change. No, I'm not. That's not where this is headed, okay? But here's what I want to tell you. Because I was really invested in it, because I had given talks and warnings, and I was a little frustrated because people didn't seem to be adequately preparing for Y2K, and it's just around the corner. We at our house, we were prepared. We had gasoline tanks on our truck, lots of them, so we could keep driving when all of the gasoline stations stopped functioning. We had food, we had water, we had all the stuff. Now, here's the warning. Here's the Nineveh syndrome. Do any of you remember what happened on Y2K? A whole bunch of nothing. A big, humongous nothing. So there were a few glitches here and there, but mostly it was a non-event. And what I found happening inside myself, I am not proud to admit, and that was disappointment, right? I am like, where's the disaster? And then I realized that because I had been warning about this and I didn't feel like people were adequately listening and preparing, there was a part of me that wished ill on them. I wanted them to get what they had coming, right? They hadn't prepared, they hadn't taken this seriously. We all had done all of this work, and they were still blithely going along, and they sort of deserved what they were going to get. So here's the lesson from that. I mean, there are many lessons. I still haven't fully unpacked why nothing disastrous happened on Y2K. But here was the lesson for me internally as a bridge builder and as a problem solver. I want you to think about something that you warn about. Maybe if you are one of our econ students, you are thinking about really loud warnings in your head if we peel back some of that economic growth, what disasters are going to happen. Maybe if you're one of our natural resources students, you're thinking about if we can't reduce our carbon emissions, what do those disasters look like? Now think about a scenario where we do the thing, right? We degrowth, or we keep producing carbon, and your disaster doesn't happen. Like, actually sit with that for a minute. And if you're disappointed, you're not in a good solution space. If you actually have this like little bit of revenge syndrome, right? Like, that should happen. I'm really invested. I put my reputation into this. I am emotionally entangled with that outcome now, and I am actively wishing ill on the people who didn't listen to me. Wherever that space is in you, and because we're all human, it's really hard to avoid it, but wherever that space is in you, if you can recognize it, step back and start making room for a broader horizon of solutions or a broader horizon of outcomes, and be pleased with things turning out better than you had predicted, that positions you to be a better listener, as we talked about on our very first Friday. Listening is hearing with a willingness to change your mind or to see the situation differently. So the challenge sort of this round is to think through, where are you maybe over-investing identity, emotion, reputation in the projections or predictions that you have made part of your shtick, part of your belief system, and where could you step back, disentangle, and figure out how to be emotionally pleased for a better outcome. Because it's going to make you a better partner, a better team member, and more creative in the solution space, because you're going to think beyond those things that you were initially attached to. And you'll still have the extra gasoline strapped to the top of your car. So you'll still just have all the resources or the good living or whatever other sacrifices you made on the direction to the outcome that you were hoping for. So thank you for hanging with us for all 3 Fridays. We really appreciate your participation, appreciate you being here, and look forward to having further conversations with you after this Friday is complete.
Go. Go, Jeff, go. All right. All right, first off, I'd like to thank Patrick, Ben, and Frank. This has been an incredible dialogue. I've learned an enormous amount. Also, a special thanks to Rob Davies, who has spent, 6 to 8 hours outside of this forum to talk to me and educate me and debate with me. And it's been absolutely incredible. So I want to jump in to the question of the day and the question I've been kind of wrangling with for the last 15 years of my career. And that is, how can we leverage the principles of free market economics, note to Ben and Craig, while respecting the boundaries of ecology and physics, Rob, and incorporating the wisdom of indigenous people, and that's Darren, to answer the question, how shall we live? So to me, this is kind of this is what I care about. How do we use economics to solve these difficult problems? And so I want to go through 5 companies that I've started with different partners and employees over the last 15 years that are profitable, but then use that profit to do environmental protection and conservation and social justice. I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but let's jump in. The first company we started with a partner of mine, Todd Lemons, who's a forester. We went to the island of Borneo. At the time, I was living in Shanghai, and we went to the island of Borneo, and you can see the massive deforestation from 85, 5 years after I was born, to a few years ago, and that's primarily due to palm oil. So palm oil comes in, it's a slash and burn in the peat swamp forests, and they grow palm oil. And every single person in this room, including myself, has used palm oil today, many times. So we bought 116,000 acres that was currently being slated for slash and burn, and we protected it. We put up a border, and we used the local indigenous people to protect it. And because we're able to keep the carbon in the ground, and because we have really smart PhDs from Oxford and Cambridge measuring that carbon, we can actually generate carbon credits every year. We're generating about $50 million in revenue every year by keeping the carbon in the ground and selling those carbon credits to primarily US airlines, utilities, oil companies. And then we take the proceeds of that, we take that $50 million, and it has 3 purposes. First is we're competing with palm oil or the government it views us as competing with palm oil for tax revenue. So we have to give about 1/3 of our income to the government so that they will support our continued protection of this. Second, we put it into environmental and social programs. And we use the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 goals, and we measure ourselves on each of those goals every year. In fact, every month. And then the third group is, it goes back to me and my investors. I believe strongly that if we're motivated by profit, then we will continue to do this. So governments, social and environmental, and then also for-profit back to investors. So the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, just a couple of stats on this. So we have about 100 employees out of the locals that know this region very well. We have a floating health clinic that services 316 people every year, giving them free health care. We put 24 people through high school and college, first time ever in this area. We have 2,000 families now with clean water and with solar. And we're the largest, or frankly, the only supporter of the Orangutan Foundation International. So when palm oil comes in and they do the slash and burn, it destroys the habitat for orangutans and frankly kills them. And so we have created the Orangutan Foundation funding. And here's a short video on that.
Most forests are now being converted to palm oil plantations, and particularly peat swamp forests. The implications are that orangutans are going to go extinct. is very important to our work. And the reason it's important is because it will help us protect the forest. The forest east of the national park was given away as a palm oil concession. And what Rimba Raya did is nothing short of remarkable, because they clawed back that palm oil concession.
We're asking governments to not convert forests or to grant concessions that convert forests to palm oil concessions. Then we have to provide an economically viable alternative. It can't just be a moral alternative.
Business and achieving social good and environmental good can work hand in hand.
We also will be using the Rimba Raya concession area to release wild-born ex-captive orangutans.
Change is blowing like the wind through the trees. The wheels are spinning and life is in motion. And I can see a light shine through the leaves. A new spark of new life is on the horizon.
When you're around an orangutan, you realize that we must protect this animal.
We're making the world a better place, one person at a time. Making the world a better place, one day at a time. And it starts right now, it starts right now. It starts right now. Change the world.
We've accomplished.
If you want to watch the rest of that, it's on the website. I want to keep moving. So that's the Indonesia project, and we've been doing that for 15 years, and it's awesome. I love it. So the second project we started about 4 years ago. It's called Mar Vivo. It's in Baja California Sur, and the threat here is not palm oil. It is commercial shrimp farming. You can see the commercial shrimp farm down here and this is on the southern end of, this is called Magdalena Bay. So we're protecting this entire area. It's 54,000 acres of mangroves. It's about 10 times that of other stuff, but the mangroves is really what we're focused on. That's where the carbon is. And in the south end here, in what's called Puerto Chale, that's this big shrimp farm. And they're starting to move up. And this is one of the top 5 most biodiverse places on Earth. And as these shrimp farms come up, they destroy the biodiversity, they destroy the locals' ability to feed their families through artisanal fishing. So we've put together a carbon project that's about 500,000 tons on average of carbon kept in the ground per year. That's generating about $15 million of cash, which again goes government, social and environmental, and then investors. These are the primary UN SDG goals that we're actually having a lot of success with. So again, healthcare, we provide free healthcare to everyone in the project area. We provide education to every child through high school and a scholarship program for college. 50% of our workforce is female, and that's not because they're female, it's because they're damn good at what they do. 55 additional families now have clean water. And 22,000 hectares of reforestation of mangroves, which is really supporting the community. And then monitoring, we have an entire group of people in the project area that monitor all of the endangered species, and that's it's an excellent job, and it brings a lot of income in. So those are the 2 carbon projects. We also do other carbon things in the Philippines and the Bahamas, but those are kind of the 2 primary projects. So as we built these these businesses and we're selling these carbon credits to various companies, the companies would come to us and say, look, we want to do something, but how much carbon do we need to buy to offset our footprint? Nobody knows the answer to that question. At the company level, it's actually kind of hard to do at the company level. But the bigger impact, and again, everything I'm doing is I'm trying to do it at the global level, at the maximal impact level. And the biggest is actually large asset managers. So pensions and endowments and hedge funds, they hold billions, trillions of dollars. And each of those portfolios has massive amounts of carbon risk in it. And we've built a tool that will take a portfolio. A portfolio manager, like a hedge fund manager, is kind of our target, and they're using this product. They upload their portfolio, and it immediately shows them where the carbon risk is in their portfolio. And they're not doing this because they're good people, right? They're from Wall Street. They're doing this because I was on Wall Street for a long time, so I can say that. They're doing this because there's risk in there, right? We know that there's climate risk. And when that risk is realized, it's going to drop the price of these stocks, and it's going to hurt their balance sheets. They're selfish. They're motivated by selfishness, which is okay. And so our tool will take various scenarios, the NGFS scenarios that I think Rob showed a couple of them, right? Whether we do it quickly or we don't do anything and then it falls apart. We can run all these different scenarios and look at the climate risk in each of these portfolios. And there's actually a very interesting angle on this. If you're an asset manager and you know there's risk where no one else knows there's risk, you have an advantage. And people are trading on that advantage and making money and building funds around this. And we're building hedging mechanisms to buy credits, to offset, to restructure portfolios. And it's working incredibly well, and it's making everyone a lot of money, and it's doing the right thing for the environment and for social justice. The third company I want to go actually, now we're on the fourth company I want to go through, is a brand new one we're launching right now, which the carbon markets are great, right? Carbon is an incredibly valuable asset that is used for the reduction of climate change. But the bigger one is actually biodiversity. So we've actually started launching a biodiversity standard modeled after the carbon markets, but taking the last 15 years of learning as a project developer, as a carbon project developer, and building a biodiversity standard better and significantly more sophisticated, but also putting the assets in the hands of the right parties. So we've taken, and we've spent the last 5 years on mapping out all of the biodiversity value and only marine biodiversity. Terrestrial biodiversity is interesting, but it's just not that globally impactful. So marine biodiversity, we've mapped the entire world over the last 5 years. We've adjusted that biodiversity volume by quality. Then we're adjusting for both risk and for impact. And that's giving us a rating. Think about it like a bond rating. So this is the what we call MAP, or the Marine Asset Accounting Protocol. This shows you all of the biodiversity around the world. And then we take that and we put it through that mechanism, or through that system, to create basically the equivalent of like a bond ladder. What are the impact and quality ratings of these assets? The two countries that we're engaged with to launch this, and this is a global standard, is Mexico and Chile. So Chile is a AA rated biodiversity country, and primarily due to their kelp forests. So kelp is an underground forest, underwater forest. It's in the ocean. And if you ever dive in these forests, it blows your mind. It's absolutely incredible. And there's an incredible amount of biodiversity in carbon. So we've partnered with Max Bello, who is the Sylvia Earle of today, to write a kelp forest methodology to both measure and quantify the biodiversity. And LATAM Airlines is going to be the first customer buying these biodiversity credits. Also in Mexico, massive corals, diverse fish species, and the largest marine mammals on Earth. Again, quantifying that and then creating the actual product and then selling it to corporates. And these are projects that are actually happening now. So that's the biodiversity standard. That is probably going to be by far the most impactful thing that we've ever done. And we're getting really good traction. The last one I want to go over, and that's because I want to inspire the students in this room. My team is made up of economists like me, conservationists, like I'm also a conservationist, but foresters, climate scientists, the type of people that typically wouldn't get along, the type of people who are on the opposite sides of this debate. But I want to inspire that we all know that there's a problem. It's okay to make money while you're solving the problem, but we have to do something. And I also want everybody to have fun doing it. So one of the new companies that we've started is called Odyssey. We bought a 130-foot sailing yacht. It's a beautiful boat. And we've engaged with one of the major streaming companies in the world to combine science and research and media content creation to establish marine protected areas in the last places on Earth that we can actually do this, right? Most of the places in the marine side are already destroyed. So we are going through a process. Let me actually go to here. So we're doing a 5-year around the world trip with a world-class documentarian, and we're going to the last beautiful places on Earth that are untouched. And we're doing this over 5 years, and we're bringing on scientists to do eDNA, water chemistry, fish biomass, and other special projects. We're going to be publishing research every quarter. We're going to be there's going to be a streaming service that's going to be releasing multiple a docuseries every year. And the ultimate result is to have these MPAs, these marine protected areas around the country. And this will all be financed through blue bonds. This is the part of the trip I'm most excited about. And so I want to finish with a video that my partner, Todd Lemons, goes through our project in Mexico, in Mar Vivo, and kind of summarizes all of this together. And we'll do that now.
My name's Todd Lemons, and we are in magnificent Magdalena Bay in Baja California Sur, Mexico. I'm the CEO of a company called Infinite Earth, which I started in 2007. We are really sort of on the fringe of creating new economic models to support conservation. We've developed a project in Borneo, Indonesia. We've been working on that for about 12 years. It's a very large lowland tropical peat swamp forest. And along the way, I got really interested in mangroves.
In particular, here you get methane, which is like 36 times more powerful than CO2.
Mangroves are an incredibly undervalued natural capital asset, both in terms of biodiversity value as well as economic value. So we started taking a look at mangrove systems around the world, and along the way landed on this magical place. And I honestly have never seen anything like it. I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
Algunas personas les digo, es bonita Bahía Magdalena, y ellos dicen, no, Melesio, esa palabra no le llega ni a los talones, o sea, no la describe. Bahía Magdalena es mucho más que bonita, más que hermosa. No hay palabras para poder decir lo que hemos disfrutado este día o esta tarde en este lugar paradisíaco.
You know, here people really appreciate what they have. There are some serious threats though, and they, as usual, you know, it's outside industrial scale investment that really is the immediate threat here. We have to move from this extractive model to a regenerative model.
Ahora la pesca comercial ha ido en caída libre, por decirlo así. Las pesquerías han ido cada vez escaseándose más.
We have to start making sure that everything we consume takes into account the cost of replacing whatever environmental damage or degradation that it caused.
Bueno, por otra parte, puedo decir que los manglares también forman parte fundamental de Bahía Magdalena. Albergan mucha vida. Podemos decir que en el caso de los peces, los crustáceos, ahí empieza su vida, ¿no?
Children in this community are not seeing, they're not inheriting what their parents and their grandparents inherited. And I think that we have a chance to help this community to get paid for the environmental services that this place is delivering.
So I think to finish, because I want to get to Darren, I think he's going to have some amazing things to say. We can do whatever we want, right? We have free market economics. We now know the limitations of ecology and physics. We know that the indigenous people, if we give them what they need, they can make this happen. So I hope this has inspired you. If you're a student on either side of the debate, it doesn't matter. Partner with the other side, get to work, and do something great. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Good afternoon. Ursula K. Le Guin said, "We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art. And very often in our art, the art of our words. Imagine an indigenous world where the land and its natural resources were stewarded and protected, where community was prioritized over individualism, where diversity and inclusion are celebrated, and where indigenous peoples and other marginalized groups have full agency and control over their lives and health. Imagine a world where the beauty of nature was celebrated and revered, where the land and its creatures were treated with respect and gratitude. A world where people lived in harmony with one another, recognizing the inherent value and worth of every individual, regardless of their background. You see, this was the world of my ancestors. The Native American people who lived here long ago, before the arrival of Europeans. They had a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of all living things, and they lived in balance with this natural world. They honored the spirits of the earth and the sky and the water, and recognized the vital role that each played in sustaining life. But then everything changed. With the arrival of colonizers came a wave of destruction, devastation, and despair. The land was taken from native people, their sacred sites destroyed or desecrated, their cultures suppressed or banned. Yet in spite of all of this, my people have endured. We have fought to maintain our identity and our connection to the land, and we continue to do so today. We have a deep resiliency, and a strong sense of community that has helped us survive even in the face of immense hardships. As a Native American man, I carry the weight of my ancestors' struggles with me every day. But I also carry their strength and their wisdom. And I am proud to be part of a people who have fought so hard to protect their way of life, to ensure that their voices are heard and never forgotten. 200 years ago, Shoshone elders did not prepare their children to have successful career paths in a capitalistic system. Their stories were meant to create self-motivated, self-directed, community-minded, brilliant, loving citizens who at their core upheld ideals around family and community and environment. They encouraged their children to find joy and place it at the center of their lives. They encouraged their children to value consent. You see, consent was key to build nations where exploitation, extraction, and depletion was unthinkable. The beauty in this kind of thinking is that it challenges the capitalistic system. Native Americans and other marginalized communities are often disproportionately affected by environmental degradations. As we promote environmental justice, we challenge the capitalistic system that prioritizes profits over the health and well-being of its planet and its inhabitants. We have always believed, as you should, that the Great Spirit put into place everything on this earth for our survival. Nature needs to be tended and lovingly cared for and maintained, to be respected and not dominated. The natural resources on this earth will continue to produce year after year, but only when our steps are light and our hearts are right. But it seems like everything's changed. How do we reconcile the past where Western values teach us that we have rights? Rights to use the land for extraction and depletion and development for the sake of $1, versus indigenous values that teach us that we have obligations to the past, present, and future. Obligations to our community. Do you know that the Iroquois nation, their leadership, they don't make any decisions without considering what effect that decision would have on 7 generations ahead? Think about the implications of our future if our leaders govern that way. There's an old Native American proverb that says, "We do not inherit this earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children." What kind of world are we leaving them? What will their world look like? Isn't it time to change our thinking and approach when it comes to stewarding this earth? Can we change our thinking and begin to consider not only the health of the people, but also the health of the watersheds that nourish our lakes and rivers, and the health of our environment? You see, this is critical. The health of the people will always parallel the health of our environment. Scientists are finally discovering what indigenous elders have been teaching for generations, that we're all connected. Politicians are discovering what the Iroquois already knew, that we must govern for the benefit of future generations. This is what the young activists are saying when they demand climate justice. We cannot sacrifice their future for the sake of short-term profits. there is not enough science in the world that will overcome our selfish behaviors. A scientist once said, "I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought with 30 good years of science, we could address those problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems today are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and a cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. Maybe now is the time to braid together this indigenous and scientific knowledge to manage our environment in ways that will change the world. This indigenous wisdom has been developed over thousands of years through observation, experience, and deep connections to the natural world. It is a holistic approach that recognizes the interconnectedness of all living things and emphasizes the importance of balance and harmony in our lives. Indigenous knowledge can provide insights into sustainable land management practices, biodiversity conservation, and the relationships between humans and non-humans. Scientific knowledge, on the other hand, is based on methods, observations, experimentations, and analysis. It provides us with a wealth of knowledge that has improved our lives in many ways. Science helps us understand the process that governs this natural world. But haven't we scienced the problem to death? Now it seems like the only solution to the problems that we face today is to include more science. Think about that one for a minute. What we do in the next decade will define us. Not doing anything is not an option. It is critical that individuals and governments and businesses take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit the impact of climate change. Because when we assume that scientific knowledge is superior to indigenous wisdom, we make collaboration impossible. And that is what is going to be needed in the future. We know what to do. We know what the problem is. We know the drivers of climate change. We know all of these things and what we need to do to solve it. But we fail to act. We fail to act because we haven't incorporated values and knowledge together. I think about the values of Native people and what lessons they could teach us today. Values that strengthen our community. Values that teach us to cherish our likenesses but celebrate our differences. Values that teach us that community is more important than individualism. Incorporating values will promote collaboration and dialogue. This kind of collaboration can lead to more effective and equitable solutions to environmental issues. Incorporating values can inform policy decisions by considering the ethical, cultural, and social implications of environmental actions. This will help decision makers to be more responsive to the needs of marginalized communities who are the most affected. Incorporating values will raise awareness for environmental issues and their importance. It will help all of us to become more engaged and informed. I believe we're in the midst of a massive paradigm shift. Now is the time that we braid together this indigenous knowledge and wisdom with cutting-edge science to create policies that will steward our water and our environment and our climate for the foreseeable future. This will require a collaborative effort that recognizes the importance of both knowledge systems. Just as history has shown, human power, even that of capitalism, is not insurmountable. We have the capacity to resist and change a system that no longer serves the greater good. By embracing the principles of community, stewardship, and sustainability that is inherent in indigenous communities, we can pave the way for a more harmonious and equitable future. By forming new kinships, forging new solidarities, and renewing our relationships, we can address both social and ecological needs that our current capitalistic system is failing to address. May we draw on the inspiration from the resiliency of Native communities and the transformative power of art and words to envision and enact a more just and sustainable future for generations to come. I love the prophecy of Chief Crazy Horse. Before he passed, he had a dream. And he said this: "Upon suffering beyond suffering, the Red Nation shall rise again. And it shall be a blessing to a sick world, a world filled with broken promises, selfishness, and separation. A world longing for light again. I see a time of 7 generations when all the colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole earth will become one circle again. In that day, there will be those among my native people who will possess this wisdom. And the young white ones will come to those of my people searching for this wisdom. I salute the light in your eyes where the whole universe dwells. For when you are at that place within you, and I am in that place within me, we shall be as one." I think the words of Crazy Horse are prophetic. Like many Native American leaders who went before, and what I believe, many Native American leaders who will come again. It's time we listen. Next year will be the 10th anniversary of the movement at Standing Rock. This movement was the largest gathering of indigenous peoples and allies for more than a century. A central theme that motivated the tens of thousands of people to participate was Ni Wichoni, or water is life. What this phrase meant was that the growth promised by an oil pipeline was not worth sacrificing our sacred obligation to protect the water that nourishes all of us. Today here in Utah, we find ourselves in a generational defining crisis to protect the Great Salt Lake. Is it worth it to sacrifice our sacred obligations to protect our relatives who need a healthy lake so that a small few can continue to make profits in the name of growth? But we have a power to change that situation. The values that motivate the thousands of people responding to this crisis are not only market values, they are relational values. An incredible diversity of connections that we all have with the lake. When the Shoshone people, my tribe, and many of you, allies, are restoring the Bear River at Wuta Agua and putting water back into the Great Salt Lake, we are renewing our relatives. Last fall, over 400 people volunteered to help us replant native habitat because they too felt a connection to renew their relatives and their relations. By bringing together people at Wuta Agua, we not only heal the water and the land, we regenerate stronger relationships, and we form community. I believe that markets, when designed sustainably and ethically, can incentivize responsible land stewardship and conservative efforts. I believe that markets can play a vital role in driving innovation in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and ecotourism to drive future economic development while preserving cultural and environmental heritage. We would do well to recognize that under capitalism, there is a tendency for those who accumulate obscene wealth to also accumulate obscene political power. These wealth and power inequalities are a clear and present danger to our collective future. I believe now is the time to collaboratively imagine a better way forward. And so, let us acknowledge the undeniable power of collaboration. Just as diverse ecosystems thrive on symbiotic relationships, so too can diverse economic systems coexist and complement one another. Embrace the wisdom of indigenous perspectives alongside the principles of capitalism. We can forge a new path forward towards a sustainable future that honors both planet and our human community. Together, through collaboration and mutual respect, we possess the capacity to cultivate a world where prosperity is measured not by material wealth, but by the health and harmony of all living things. Thank you.
Wise words. Thank you both, Darren and Jeff. I'm so humbled and inspired at this group of people who've been working so hard over these last few weeks to come together and have these conversations. And for all of you being here, thank you so much for being part of the conversation. We have a 15-minute break. There's sugar packaged in a variety of different ways to get your blood sugar up in the lobby here. But we'll start promptly at 2:15. We've got a lot of hard questions coming up for this panel. There will be lightning bolts and other things coming out of this panel. It's packed with lots of hard questions, so I'm excited for that. We'll start promptly at 2:15. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks for being here.
sensor, so that's kind of like 4 cameras in one. One has IR, infrared, so you can see when it's dark. Then you're not spinning, turning. The nice part about a fixed camera is it's fixed. The handheld zoom cameras, you're looking at this because it's important, and then something happens over here, you don't get it because that's not where it was finished.
Yeah, I mean, in a venue like this, I'd probably want to put more of a 360 camera if that was the concern.
Yeah.
So what I don't know as, I guess, the venue manager is what the person's concerns are and how they would like to manage that.
Well, let's, I hate to. 2 mics will be for the moderator. Perfect.
We'll have 3, actually.
3? Yeah. Okay, so we're doing this, and then this is what people can pass around.
Oh, okay.
Does that work?
Yeah, that's fine, yep.
So we'll just like separate it like that.
We'll start shuffling them back in.
Should I go?
Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
They said there was one other mic for the. Oh.
There we go.
I'll pass.
Hey, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. My name's Anna McIntyre. I'm the Managing Director of the Janet Quinney Lawson Institute for Land, Water, and Air here at Utah State. And we just want to thank you for being here, sticking with us, and being a part of this. Just by raise of hands, right as they're turning the house lights off, who has been here and been with us for all 3 weeks of the Dialogue series? Thank you. Round of applause to you. We appreciate you. That's a significant time investment for being involved with these discussions, and we hope that you found them valuable. I'm going to start by having the panel introduce themselves. We've got, again, many faces that we've had here before, a few new faces as well. So please introduce yourself and tell us something that you're looking forward to for this long weekend.
Hi, I'm Courtney Flint. I'm a professor in the Department of Environment and Society in the Quinney College of Natural Resources. And I am looking forward to a little downtime and catching up and playing games and snuggling with my dog who just had surgery, so I can look after him.
I have a very similar weekend planned. I'm Caitlin McLennan. I'm the Director of Sustainability here at Utah State University. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a good book and my 2 tiny cats at my apartment.
I'm Rob Davies. I'm with the Department of Physics. I work in global change and critical science communication. This has been a really intense run-up for this symposium. It's been 3 weeks of fabulous on-stage and off-stage discussions, so I frankly don't know what's happening after 3 o'clock today. I haven't thought any further past that.
I'm Craig Paulson. I'm a professor in the Economics and Finance Department in the business school. And I'm not looking forward as much to the weekend, but to get it done because next week Netflix releases the live action version of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Jeff Reese, USU grad and entrepreneur, and I'm going canyoneering down in St. George with my family.
Jeannie Johnson, Director of the Center for Anticipatory Intelligence, and I am leaving directly from here, so that is love, people, because I should be in Kanab right now. So you are the only thing between me and a really great Red Rock hike in Kanab. So we're gonna try it one more time to get tickets for the wave, so please root for us.
That's code for she has a CIA gig somewhere around the world. Who knew? I'm Darren Perry. I'm the former chairman of the Shoshone Nation. I teach environmental humanities at the University of Utah. And this weekend, I don't have anything, no speaking engagements, but I'm gonna write. I'm in the middle of my 2nd book, and I wanna write, so.
Thank you. We are glad to have all of you here today. I get to come up here and ask like one random question and then sit down and listen to you all again, which is a delightful way to do this. But I'd like to start this panel where Darren left off. And these are fibers of threads that I feel like have been woven through the past 3 weeks. And we've spent a lot of time talking about values. And we may be on any number of different trajectories for the future. But I'd like to ask, and I don't know if the question's gonna come up on the screen, but, oh, that's fine. What, if you could choose and highlight one value that society should hold on to, no matter what the future holds, what do you think that one of those values should be? And while the panel is answering, I'd like the audience to think of that as well, because I'd like some of you to shout those out also after we go through some of those. We can go down the line too.
All I remember is going on plant walks with my grandmother out at Antelope Island, and she'd identify plants that were used as food medicine. But she talked about the rocks and the plants and the water as our non-human kinfolk. That's how she referred to the natural environment. And she taught me a lesson one day about kin. They're more than a relationship, they're our relatives. And don't we treat our relatives a little different? Well, some of them we do. But I learned at an early age that the environment and the things in the environment, when she spoke to them as our non-human kinfolk, that taught me that the value system and how I look at the environment needs to be a little bit different. And so for me, that value of kinship and taking care of the environment was really entrenched in me at an early age.
I have worked in really diverse circumstances. I have worked in the middle of violence. I have worked in diplomacy. I have worked in intelligence, and now have the opportunity to work with farmers and engineers and military veterans and folklore enthusiasts, because the center that I'm so privileged to be a part of brings in people from every walk of life and from all 8 colleges, and it is a joy to be together. And out of all that, the primary virtue is healing. It's healing each other. It's healing in the earth. It's any time you have an opportunity to heal up a wound, then you take that opportunity. I remember Karen giving a beautiful talk one time about healing with our words. So as I look at each of you, I can think of those of you that I know, aspects of healing that you're engaged in, and for me, there is not a higher calling.
I would say empathy.
I think mine's actually related to empathy and what some people might call equality, but I would like to formulate it as charity. Loving others as you love yourself, and just really caring for the wellness of everyone.
So we're all, I think, converging on similar thoughts, and building on that. The lessons that come to us, and listening to Darren just now from the environment, are we often talk about survival of the fittest in this sort of misinterpretation of Darwin. But the big rule of ecosystems, I think, is community and collaboration, which Darren spoke beautifully about. Every piece of the system is there to support every other piece and is needed. And so there's a police officer I follow on social media in Savannah, Georgia, who is just so eloquent and wonderful, former CIA officer also. But what he likes to say is all of us matter or none of us do. So that notion of compassion and empathy. And when we say all of us, I want to include, as Darren mentioned, all of us, the non-human and the human. Thank you.
Yeah, community collaboration and collectivism, triple C. I just echo everything the panel just mentioned, coming together in community.
I would say complexity. I think a commitment to seeing the complex interactions amongst all of us in humanity, but also with the natural world, to help us avoid the unintended consequences of oversimplification that can mask the lived experiences of some, and just to think carefully about those complexities in our relationships.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Jeannie has talked to all of us and asked that we put ourselves out of our comfort zone. So is there anyone who's willing to yell out values that you think that we as a society should prioritize, whatever the future holds? Humility. Excellent. Honesty. So good. Honoring the future. Honoring the future. Yes. Interconnectedness with nature. 2 more. Responsibility.
I think we have an issue with identity. Because if we don't identify who we are, what we stand for, and who we believe in, we are not connected. We only have less than 100 years on this life, and then we pass into another life. If we don't understand that, we'll never identify who we are and what we really believe and stand for.
I appreciate that. I wish I could restate it for the live stream, but that was wonderful. I'm sure the panelists would love to give you all the seats up here. But I'm going to turn it over to Patrick.
I've got the next question here. Coming back to this point that Rob put out there, I want to make sure if we are on the same page and explore it further. Rob made a case that we are a factor of 2 into ecological overshoot. We are inherently unsustainable. And so I'd like for anybody to be able to speak to, if you don't believe we're there, I'd like you to defend that position. If you do think we're there, how should we get back to a sustainable state on the global scale? What's the pathways that we can pursue? Let's start there.
I'd say, yes, I think the data are clear on this. I think in terms of actions, I think it's about actually moving forward to new and novel approaches, many of which that Jeff has shared with us today. And also, I think it's important not to think about social dimensions and the lived experiences of real people in real places to help us get to this sustainable state that we aspire to.
Going down the line. The data are clear. I think you can look at any planetary boundary or global emissions framework, right, and see we've got about 6 years, thanks to the IPCC, to cut emissions in half. And this is an inherently social issue. It's about humans and what Darren mentioned, values. And I think that's the first step, is getting very clear on exactly what our values are and what we're interested in preserving, right? And then working towards that innovation space. Deep decarbonization, right? I love carbon credit to protect biodiversity, but I also am really interested in businesses decarbonizing and electrifying their operations in the first place. But also, solutions have to be very local, right? We need to understand what's on the ground, what are the lived experiences, and how we can protect that at the same time.
You didn't answer on how we're going to get to a sustainable state. I know we know that you believe in, that you argue for the factor of 2 overshoot, but not, we need to hear your ideas.
Well, I was going to make him come back to that.
Yeah, so I guess I was passive, because indeed I do agree that we're, call it roughly a factor of 2, or maybe it's 1.9, or maybe it's, 2.2, but we're deep into overshoots. So just from the biophysical standpoint, I mean, the social, cultural, economic pathways, these are myriad. There's so many different pathways that are open to us socially, culturally, et cetera. But biophysically, yes, we have to do things more efficiently than we do, produce human well-being more efficiently with energy and material use than we do. That's a given, but we also, Caitlin gave us a time frame of something like 6 years before we exceed our 1.5 degree carbon budget. There are similar sorts of very tight time frames with big uncertainties as to massive risk. And so the short answer is we need to figure out how to move forward now more lightly, as Darren put it. And to put it a little more bluntly, we need to use better, but we also need to use less. So over the period of the next several decades, we need to reduce our material and energy footprints. Some people call this degrowth, but it's not. Degrowth is not an economic crash. Degrowth is how we avoid an economic crash. And so we need to use less and take ourselves down to below that 1 Earth level, and then move into this dynamic, steady state where as a society we continue to develop and make lives better for everyone. But biophysically, the first thing we need to do is move into using less and figure out how to do that in the economy that we have, or by transforming the economic system that we have.
I can't speak to the factor of overshoot. Clearly, we have a path ahead of us where we could be causing serious damage if uncorrected. But I don't know where we sit on that, so I can't speak specifically to that. But how could we get back to a sustainable state on the global scale? As a reminder, sustainability is meeting the needs of the current generation while also without compromising the future's ability to meet their needs. So we need to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the current generation. We have poverty around the world. People, the majority of, well, I can't say the majority of the world, but we have poverty around the world, and that poverty is energy intensive. Because of that poverty, people are forced to cut down trees to provide for themselves. So I specialize in Haiti. Haiti, one of their main sources of fuel is cutting down trees, turning it into charcoal, burning that, right? There's deforestation, there's loss of biodiversity, there's carbon emissions. There's so many problems that come from that. And we need to help countries like that afford the solutions that have lower impact on the world and lower energy use.
I just want to say one thing real quick. I don't think you meant to do this, Craig, but pointing to the poor countries on the world as the source of our environmental degradation is pointing in exactly the wrong place. The footprint of the average American is something on the order of 26 times the average Bangladeshi, and I don't know the number for the average Haitian. But whatever degradation they're having on their local environment, ours, I can assure you, is an order of magnitude bigger. And so I think I just want to keep that out there, that yes, we need to move people up into greater well-being. And in order to take people whose needs are not being met now, those of us who live in these extraordinarily highly consumptive societies, those of us in this room, are going to need to make ecological space for them to do that.
And to be clear, that means cutting 90% of our GDP to reallocate that to other countries, right?
To be clear, that means that all the high-income nations have got to reduce their energy and material throughputs to allow, and that's going to have to come from, we have to make choices. What sectors, do we cut? And I think we can look at luxury sectors, we can look at wants instead of needs, but there are people, as you mentioned, in nations around the world, most people, whose basic needs are not being met. And so that means us in the high-income countries deciding where those resources go and where they don't, if we are to agree that all of us matter or none of us do.
Yeah, I guess we disagree on the point on if we cut global GDP in half, which is the solution to getting to one Earth, right? If we're at a factor of 2 overshoot, we have to cut global GDP in half, is what you said, right?
There's, roughly speaking, yes, but there's a lot of structure within that, right? So it doesn't just mean that you cut it in half. This is a planned reduction, not just cut everything. In certain sectors, among certain consumers, among certain products. So it's planned, and then there are certain sectors that need to grow, of course. But if you're dealing with a resource-constrained situation, you have to then prioritize. So I think a lot of it is about deciding, how do you do that? How do we actually run a system where you can take everyone to a basic level of well-being? And I certainly don't have that answer. But the physics is going to tell us that either we do it by design or by disaster, and I'd rather do it by design.
I would love to hear from Jeff. Because I think you've done an interesting job of dealing with this formula, right?
Yeah, I feel the same thing Craig feels when Rob says degrowth. As an economist, that word makes me uncomfortable. But that's okay, right? I think being uncomfortable is what this is all about. Darren had a beautiful tweet the other day. He said, when you have more than you need, build a bigger table, not a bigger fence. And I must keep different company because I have 2 friends in this audience who are doing this exact thing. Nelda Alt-Dislin is working with refugees and placing them in this community. And Drew Mitchner is the owner and CEO of Greenbox, a solar company who is installing solar systems throughout this entire community. So the people that I associate with are already working on these problems, and we're working on them by the combination of Craig's background of economics and Rob's background of physics and ecology. So in my mind, in my world, we're already doing this. And, and the wisdom of Darren, this non-human kinsfolk, I can't get that out of my head now. I'm going to be thinking about that forever. But my mind is, to answer the question, Rob's presentation said 1.8, not to be technical. But again, I think, yeah. But I think the people in my sphere, we are already working on this, and it's a collaborative approach between these two ways of thinking. And like I said at the end of my presentation, I think we need to reach across the aisle. My partner's a forester, and I'm an investment banker. The two should not get along well, but we're best friends, and we're solving these problems, and we're doing it by using both principles.
I want to press into that a little bit, though. The question is, are we doing it at a pace that actually solves the problem? We can certainly point to examples of people doing good things. But Rob showed a very compelling plot of energy consumption. And every solar panel, every wind farm, every geothermal plant, every hydropower plant in the world has not reduced fossil fuel consumption. That's only increased. So are we doing it at a pace that is actually solving the problem, or can we just look to examples that make us feel a bit better but aren't really getting us to where we need to be? Feel free to address that or not, Jeannie. But
Well, I guess it's a great point, but I would just say let's be really cautious about taking the wind out of the sails of people who are making an effort.
Yeah.
We may not get to a perfect location. We may be facing some really steep consequences. So let's keep putting wind in the sails and not tokenizing the efforts that people are creatively coming up with and are engaging in. Get excited about those, get behind them, become part of them, and then we might discover more all the way along. Because we could answer your question and say, nope, not sustainable, and therefore death and destruction. But I'm not sure that helps us get out of bed better in the morning and work on it. So I think it's really important to make sure that we don't diminish the efforts that are going on.
I want to hear from Darren on this.
I've only got one thought on this, and it's because I get to get up twice a week and take an hour and a half commute to go to my work. And I get to meet with 18 grad students that are environmentalists and activists, and man, their hair's on fire with the environment. But it reminds me of Standing Rock. You know who made the difference at Standing Rock? The youth. And that's what gives me hope. But I'll tell you, when I talked about the very few wealthy people, and then the very few that hold that political power, if we want to make systemic change, that political power, we've got to do something with that. And I would guess 70% of the students on this campus probably didn't vote. Vote. Your voices, be an activist, vote. Say enough's enough. I go to the legislature twice a week just for my mental health degradation. And I honestly have the thought, hell, I go to church with these people and I do not see eye to eye with one of them, ever. And I think, how could that be? And so I think if we want to make a difference quickly, if the youth get organized and vote, it's your future. I've lived an old life. If I die tomorrow, so be it. But man, I have hope because of the youth that I see care. But you got to translate that into more political power. And then when you have that political power, we can start enacting things that can help solve the problem.
Let me jump in here. To Darren's point, an economist once said when asked if we should throw the people out of office, the wrong people out of office, he says we need to make sure we're making it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. I thought that was a wise statement. I want to switch gears here. I want to go to Courtney and Caitlin. Thus far, we've been talking about kind of the macro level, right? The macro economy, GDP. We're talking about the global level. The global resources that are being constrained. I want Caitlin and Courtney to comment on how this affects us as individuals. In macroeconomics, it's built upon micro foundations, the decisions of individuals. And so if you don't mind commenting, maybe Caitlin and then Courtney, on how these big picture trends will affect people's lived experiences.
I didn't want to go first.
Courtney?
I think my students hear me rage against the machine all the time about individual actions, and voting is our most powerful one, right? Organizing together, talking about our climate feelings. I think working in climate is a great way to figure out exactly what monster is in the room that you're staring at, right? Peeling apart the way that organizations make decisions. But getting to this question, how these big picture trends relate to people's lived experiences, is that maybe goes back to what Craig was saying. You need to ask what people need now, right? If we're talking about timelines that people have real difficulty comprehending, the first question when we're doing any sort of outreach or any sort of solution building should be, what do you need now? What's missing from your quality of life or your job? Or we're doing a workforce development grant right now, so that's where I'm at. But how can we make everything better today? And then how can we shift our resource consumption for tomorrow? Because the decisions we do make, right, in these bigger policy spaces have real effects to lived experience. That's not pragmatic, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I think that while we are connected intimately to a global world, we don't live at the global scale, and we don't live in theoretical space. So indicators like GDP and GNP, Bobby Kennedy said in 1968 that they measure everything except what makes life worthwhile. And so as people experience change in their own communities, they have their own values, and they have their expectations for their own lives, and those are their children's, and those are the future generations. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, and that, I think I direct something called the Utah Wellbeing Project, and we gather data and comments from people all over the state, and on all kinds of aspects of their well-being, and we ask them to just share their thoughts. And we have people in communities here that say, whether they're in Bluff or they're in Delta or even Vineyard, our most rapidly growing community and very urban space, we need a grocery store. Some places need economic growth. They have needs that are not being met on a daily basis. And then we have communities where, as someone said, like Park City, where they say the millionaires are being pushed out by the billionaires. And yet the people who do the day-to-day jobs and make beds and clean toilets and flip burgers, they can't live in this community, right? And so there are these disparities in the experience of growth or the lack thereof, and some people in places really desperately need some growth, while in other spaces we need to think about really dialing down and growing in new ways, and thinking about circular economies rather than the linear economy of take and make and dispose, and we talked a lot about negative externalities, and them into what we call sacrifice zones in other places where we don't have to look at it, not in my backyard. And we need to think about circularizing economies, thinking about how we can reuse and recycle and bring sustainability into our lives and our communities, and in new ways that at that lived experience, values of real people in real places.
Very good. Thank you, Courtney. Hang on to that right there. We're going to shift gears. Courtney mentioned about negative externalities. Inequality is likely considered a negative externality of a capitalist economic system, among others, right? We're short on time, so I want maybe a one-sentence answer for those that want to participate about the next question. What's preventing us from solving these negative externalities, and how can we do so going forward? Do we want to just start on one and maybe collect your thoughts there. And I'll keep talking slowly so that you have some time to think about how to solve the world's problems in one sentence. Courtney.
Well, I think that one of our real problems is that we are all too willing to push those externalities, negative externalities, off onto other people and other places and other ecosystems, and we need to think about our own spaces. I think that's one of the things that's preventing us.
I think change is hard, and that's what's preventing it too. It's just really hard to think about doing something differently when you've been doing something one way for a long time. Young people specifically, very good at thinking about doing things differently, which might be a solution.
I think this very notion of externality as it appears in our society, in our current economic paradigm, is the problem. So if you move to another paradigm like, say, ecological economics that sees, as the diagram that Roz put up, that sees the economy as embedded in the biosphere, then there are no externalities. And everything is an effect. And so what we sometimes call an externality is somebody else's internality. They're experiencing it. So this very notion that there is something happening out there as opposed to it's all happening in here, I think is one thing that needs to get rethought.
No matter where the solution lies, there's going to be a big policy, political issue there. And the problem is the incentives are not aligned for politicians to actually want to solve these negative externalities. So usually it requires some sort of collective action issue, and we can't solve those off. Our own tendencies, we don't want the politicians that are going to say, this is the path that we go forward. We feed the politicians that say, you know, eat, drink, and be merry today, don't worry about it, and then the next generation dies, right? So I think that's our biggest barrier.
I think it's awareness. I mean, if you went to a Maverick and bought a Snickers, and instead of it being $1, it was $1.20, because that 20 cents was the cost of palm oil and the degradation to the biodiversity that it causes, I think we'd be much more aware of it. So for me, it's just awareness at the pocketbook.
I think DES has its own momentum. That's why I tend to be a really strong advocate for doing things in your own space, you know, amazing ideas like we saw from Jeff's presentation that maybe just solve one problem in one area, but it's inspiring. It's the rest of us thinking about what could I be part of? Where could I contribute? And I think your generation in particular has had this kind of internal awakening that Darren was talking about. You want to find solutions. You want to be healers, both with each other and with the earth. So as we see these sorts of successes, they build on each other and they create a momentum and they create a sense of hope and enthusiasm. And I think we just have to go forward from where we are. We may not be able to see the big picture solution from the beginning, but you just have to start where you are with the stakeholders who are your neighbors in your own community and start figuring things out. And I do appreciate the big thinkers. I just have a strong caution about saying, if we can't solve it all, is it worth solving the piece in front of us?
I don't know. The only thought I had was, how much do you need to be happy? And the only reason I thought about this is I was invited by the University of Copenhagen to give a lecture. I did, spent 8 days in Copenhagen, cleanest, most beautiful city I've ever seen in my life. They'll be carbon neutral by 2025 as a country. They bike and walk everywhere. At dinner one night with some grad students, I asked the question, because I'd done my homework, how come you guys are voted the happiest people in the world every year? And she looked at me and she said, we all have a job, we all have a home, and we all have free health care. What more do you need? And you know, that resonated, that rattled around in my brain for months. How much do you need? You know, their homes were only 1,000 square foot. What do you need? I mean, think about that. Because they're doing it, and they're happy. So what do we need?
We just threw this graph up here, and it's just one illustration in a lot of studies that have shown that up to a point, money can buy some happiness, but it's really only because it helps us meet our basic needs. After a certain point, money doesn't buy happiness, and in fact, the more money, the happiness and life satisfaction really begin to decline. So there's empirical evidence to suggest that we rethink our goals and what it is that we need, and in less in monetary terms and more in terms of our relationships and our lives.
Thank you. I want to move through this next question very quickly too, because I want to spend some time on the very last one, which is about what can we all be doing. So this second to last question is, with the observed decline in trust in research and institutions and the prevalence of misinformation and disinformation out there, how can we shift to a more sustainable trajectory in a fair and transparent manner? How do we fix the people side of this problem? Anyone?
Well, I'll say one thing, and I think that we often think of we have a certain notion of what an expert is, right? And I think that we need to shift to a more inclusive recognition of the knowledge and the wisdom that is in our indigenous communities, in our local communities, in our professions, in industry, and have more dialogue and listen more. And I think that will help us bridge this gap that we have between science and society. And I think the second thing I would say is that we spend a lot of time focusing on consensus models. What can we agree upon? What do we have consensus about? And I think sometimes that reduces us to what we end up with is completely banal. And all that we actually really value is on the cutting room floor, because we're not willing to accept that conflict is going to be an inevitable part of this. We have to actually embrace conflict in a respectful way, to listen and learn from others.
I would just say I think it's interesting the way this question is worded, because it assumes that that's where the best ideas are being generated. I just think that's interesting. And, kind of coming back to Courtney's point, speaking for myself, I've spent 23 years here. And the most insightful conversations I've had recently have not been in our hallways or walkways of campus. They've been in the lived spaces of some of our stakeholders, because they revealed costs and benefits and thinking and trade-offs that I was just completely unfamiliar with. And they often feel humiliated by us. They feel like we out-talk them or speak down to them. And so they have largely exited the conversation. And I think that not always respectful interaction that has sometimes emanated from universities and their graduates has been a primary variable in eroding the trust. I think it's less about trust and more about a demand for equal dignity in our conversations.
Yay, I get to come up here and close us out. Thank you all for sticking with us. We have one more question. After 3 weeks, it's about time to disband our little fellowship, and it's been so enjoyable. We're this close to the weekend, and Jeannie's gonna get in her car and win the Wave Lottery, and Caitlin and Courtney are gonna cuddle their cats and dogs. We're gonna have a great long weekend, and then we're gonna wake up on Tuesday. And aside from Last Airbender, what's next? What is the next thing? I'd like to give a magic wand to our panel again. And I truly believe, as Utah's land-grant institution, we are building the state's problem solvers. So how do we go out as individuals, as USU, as a country, as society? What is the next step? What do we do? How do we get up out of bed and affect the change that we want to see so that we can live our values?
I know I'm the last person who just spoke, but I do have an idea, but it's about you. So I was speaking to an AI CEO a little while ago, and he told me that he has reversed his decision on teleworking. That is no longer allowed. He wants everyone in the office, and it's in Barcelona, and if they won't move, they can't work for his firm. I was like, wow, that's bold, and I'm kind of surprised. And he said, well, it was because we could no longer capture the benefits of data shedding. Now, maybe you had heard this term. I hadn't. What he meant was, as I'm chatting with Darren, I'm shedding data, right? I'm saying my ideas out loud because we're just sort of standing next to each other, getting water or walking down the hall, and then he's talking to me. And in that data shedding, we start to have an idea space where we start to see bridges between our points of view, or we generate something new. And by having people separate from each other, that data shedding and idea generation wasn't happening for his company anymore. So he was bringing people back together. And that was really the heart and soul purpose of this set of dialogues, really was bringing you together. So finding, walk down the halls of a building you don't normally go to. Or find a roommate and really talk to them about their discipline and their major. Or self-organize events like this on your own, where people from really different backgrounds get to talk to each other and do some data shedding and some idea generation. We can all do that. We can do that waiting for, the 45 minutes it takes to get your Subway sandwich, which is apparently what all of us do at noon or 1 o'clock on this campus. You can talk to the person in line. So there are lots of opportunities to start that, but I think we've become a little insular in even the way we share our conversation with each other.
Let me get it over with. I just think we need to turn off the national news and go serve in your community and build your community. Gandhi said that our greatest ability as humans is not to change the world, but to change ourselves. But don't you think as we change ourselves collectively, we begin to change the world? So let's do it here in Sihivugoi, which means Cache Valley. We call it Willow Valley. You guys kept screwing it up and naming it something else. But let's start in our individual communities and work together, who neighbors that I politically don't align with at all, but man, I love them to death because we have a sense of community. And let's start on that level, see where it goes.
Yeah, I guess I look at it individually, it's quite easy, right? Bike commute, live in a smaller home, carpool. At individual level, I think it's quite easy. And then at the global level, start a company, start an NGO, join a company, join an NGO that is doing the work at the global level that's making a difference.
We need more solutions. It's time to build.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Craig. And so I think if the one thing I guess I wanted to bring to this, the biggest thing I wanted to bring to this conversation is this notion again of a solution space. And so we have where we are and where we want to be, and lots of ideas as to how to get from where we are to where we want to be, and we need to bound that. And the bounding was was physics, was what does physics allow us to do? And many of the pathways we're choosing to follow don't take us to where we want to go. The physics won't allow that. So if we just then accept that bit, say, here are the limitations, and then once you constrain one dimension, right, lots of other dimensions open up. And so what I want is this, I guess thank you, Patrick, you got that up there. Where I see this is, so much of what we said is valid on all those paths that are still within that solution space. They're primarily not technologically related. We're trying to figure out how to move ourselves along there. When I teach, students are constantly wanting to know, what do I do? And so I think what we do is try to understand as holistically as we can where we are. And even though not all of us are going to work on every problem, we can't. But at least we understand that the things that we want to work on, where we bring our talents and our and our joy, the things that we love to do, to that, we understand that I'm working on this, but this is how this might affect these other things. And I think once we have millions more minds actually working within the actual solution space, even at any scale that you want, then that's where it starts. And so the very first thing we need to do as individuals is decide what brings me joy, what are my talents, what are the things I want to work on. And then you start moving forward with that. And I love what Jeannie said about, I'll rephrase it, which is you can't see every step to the top of the mountain, but you can see the next steps. And if we can say, if we were to navigate this landscape, what would be next? And there are so many next steps. And then we course correct as we go along. But we need that map in our head as to, okay, what just isn't going to work, and then where are the things that, well, maybe they're hard, but at least they're not impossible. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll bring us right there to that solution space since tomorrow, Tuesday, I'm presenting to the faculty to let them know our emissions increased by about 12%. This last year, right, we just completed our annual greenhouse gas inventory. However, if Utah State University wants to start walking the talk, we can invest in full through our Central Energy Plant's decarbonization plan, putting about 500 tons of geothermal well capacity underneath the parking lot of the stadium. We can also commit to an institutional climate action planning process, right? Looping in statewide campuses, thinking about how we're going to deeply integrate sustainability into what you guys learn every single day, right? I want every single major to understand what sustainability means, getting to that planetary ikigai, right? What do I do? What do I love to do? And what am I good at? In addition, right, we're the state's land-grant university. We're in charge of preparing and training the workforce of tomorrow. We have a Green Jobs Grant right now, and it's up to the institution to invest in that and sustainability as a profession in full, right? We've got to develop and invest in our sustainability programs, create more opportunities for collaboration at this institution, and decarbonize. I've got the plans if you've got the money.
I'll just say I think we need to shift our land grant mission from an info out model to an info in, and to encourage dialogue and engagement and use the tools that we have to inspire collaboration, to bring people together, to work on these complex problems. I would say if you're a student, seek out the kinds of classes that are going to challenge you and get you thinking about the complexity of issues. And there aren't simple answers, but where come together, we can put our heads together and step into a space that might be more uncomfortable for you, but where you will listen and learn and offer your own ideas in pursuit of good solutions.
Thank you so much. And thank all of you for being here. We are right at the top of the hour. And I just want to say this has been an incredible process. This started back in September, October with a conversation that Rob and I had, and then Frank Caliendo and I had, and then Craig and Ben, and just knew Jeannie and Darren and Caitlin and Courtney. And then we found Jeff. It's really been an incredible process of new connections that have been made, new conversations that have been had. I'm really thrilled that you all have been here to take your time to be part of it. And this really is just the start. We've started a lot of new conversations here. We've got a lot of new ideas, and we're going to move forward from here. I really appreciate all of your thoughts and ideas, and look forward to working more with you, getting this solved. Thanks so much for being here. Take care.